Hello everyone to our next episode for the Religions of the World class. Today we're inside, not only because it's raining outside today, not as nice as yesterday, but also because we are talking about Confucius. And Confucius was about learning, and therefore being among the books and everything is much more proper for Confucius than it was for Lao Tzu when we needed to be outside. You also see that I'm dressed in a way that you probably have never seen me before, in a suit and a tie. And that's also because Confucius was very proper, making sure that you are exactly behaving the role that you are fulfilling. Now, I'm not saying that professors always have to wear this. Actually, as a matter of fact, I wanted to wear my graduation outfit. It would have been even more proper, but that's in the storage, so I couldn't get there today. So I am dressed properly as Confucius would have wanted me to be the role of the professor. Now, Confucius lived at pretty much the same time as Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu might have been a little bit older, if he even existed, right? Remember that Lao Tzu was maybe more of a semi-fictional person. But Confucius is certainly a real person. To summarize Confucius' life briefly, he was born in state of Lu, a vassal state to the Sui dynasty, in 551 BCE. He was a teacher, even though he occupied various different government official positions. He was the governor of justice at one point. He was very well educated in those kinds of things that a Chinese person would have been educated in, and he was knew pretty much by heart the book of history, the book of poems, the book of change, the book of rites, and the historical spring and autumn annals. Those would have been the books that he would have been teaching, and was very good at it. He was very much disappointed in his duke. The duke was not a good leader, not at all what he would have expected of the head of government. He was allowing himself to be used by some of the other dukes around. For example, one time his Duke Dong, accepted 80 women and 124 horses from a neighboring duke. The duke was just enjoying life, riding on his horses, entertaining the women, and Confucius thought that that was deeply immoral, and so he left. He left for 13 years. He had enough. He traveled through the rest of China from many different places to teach, and of course in the meantime also developed his own. Finally, the state of Lu asked him back, and so he came back and was a teacher within the state of Lu. All of the teachings that Confucius taught were eventually collected in the Analects. I have covered my book again with the cover for the Analects, Confucius's Analects. Remember that again, during this time, everyone was looking to find the Tao. And the questions that we remembered were, how do we find the Tao? How do we live the Tao? And how do we build a society? We heard earlier that Taoism was answering the first question about how do we find the Tao and how do we live the Tao. But for Lao Tzu, it pretty much remained a personal issue about how we personally find the Tao and live it out. And so he found it in nature and in the person himself. Confucius, though, went a little bit further. For Confucius, it had to be exact. He thought that if one finds the Tao within oneself, one has to see and exhibit that in life. One has to aspire to be a noble man, or a junzi, as he was calling it. The junzi was somebody who practiced virtues. For Confucius, a junzi, or a superior man, was on the one hand practicing humility, but was also someone who put into practice what he learned. For example, here from the Analects of Confucius. Is it not a pleasure, having learned something, to try it out at due intervals? Is it not a joy to have friends come from afar? Is it not gentlemanly not to take offense when others fail to appreciate your abilities? he kind of puts a finger on it, right? That if you have a skill, you need to continue practicing it, otherwise we'll lose it. I don't know how many of you might play an instrument, but if you don't practice your instrument, you will soon not be as good at it anymore. You have to practice it. So Confucius emphasized personal and governmental morality, correctness of social relationships, and justice and kindness and sincerity. He basically said that ceremony is important. So question for you. Of course, this year, unfortunately, there won't be any graduation ceremony at Bergen Community College because of the coronavirus. But if there had been, would you have planned to participate if this was your senior year? Or if you are still waiting for graduation, will you go to your graduation? Many people say the associate's degree is not important, right? So you just don't do it. But Confucius would say, no, it's important that you go to your graduation because you deserve it. You have done lots of work, you have studied hard, you have spent lots of money on this too, and therefore you need to take time out and celebrate that. There are other ceremonies that are important, or ritual propriety as he calls it. One needs to pay attention to certain things, like if you have a death in the family, you should take time and mourn. If you have a birthday, for example, wouldn't it be sad if nobody recognizes it? If there was no birthday cake? This is important for Confucius, to mark each one of those places and to practice ritual propriety. Also remember, in ancient Chinese religions we talked about ancestrism. Well, Confucius talks about how it is important to treat your parents with reverence. That you should obey them as a child, that you should be there for them when you are an adult, that you should respect their wisdom when they're older, that you will bury them with honor at the end of their life, and that you will come anytime to their aid when they need to. That is called filial piety. Be obedient to honorable people. And here are the 5 relationships that are especially important for Confucius. The 5 basic relationships. Number 1 is the ruler and the subject. Number 2 is the father-son relationship. Father, son. Number 3 is the husband and wife relationship. Number 4 is the relationship between the older brother and the younger brother. Number 5 is the relationship between the older friend and the younger friend. Now, if we were in class, I would now have us discuss these relationships. As a matter of fact, one thing that he says, the most important one, is the father-son relationship, is the most basic one, as I guess it is the first one that a child would learn, the relationship to his father. But let me ask you this: if we were in class, I would solicit that from you. Is there something that bothers you in this? I know some people would probably say, wait a moment, this is all male. The only woman this is the wife, right? And people would get upset. Why is this so male dominant? Well, of course, we could soften this and the parent and the child instead of father and son. It might also say the older sibling to the younger sibling. Maybe it makes it a little bit more palatable. But we do have to recognize that for Confucius, it was truly like this. The age and the gender differences were very important. You can see that on the left column you have the superior role, and on the right side you have the submissive role. For Confucius, it was important that everybody acted their role in society. He said that if everyone was perfectly acting the role assigned to them, then society would be perfect. The ruler had to be a good ruler. What in your eyes would be a good leader? What would be the perfect president of the United States like, for example. For Confucius, it was clear. It had to be like the ancient sage ruler, the one who did the best for his subjects, did the best possible thing to have everyone live well. And in turn, the subject was supposed to listen to the ruler. Of course, when it comes to the family relationship, the son had to listen to the father. That was important for him. Now, given this gender and age rule, that was very important for Confucius, because what would be the mother-son relationship like? For Confucius, it would have been that the mother still had to be subject to her son. And the same thing would actually be true of number 4, the relationship between the siblings. What if there was an older sister and a younger brother? Who had to listen to whom? Well, according to Confucius, the sister, even though if she were older, still would have to listen to her younger brother. So the age and gender was very important for Confucius. Age and gender. And which one was more important? Gender was subject to age, right? So that if an older sister and a younger brother, even though he is age-wise the younger, he would still have preference over the older sister because of his gender. And then the 4th thing that was important for Confucius was to cultivate knowledge, not creativity. We take a lot of pride in being creative these days. Creativity is something that we foster and we would like to develop. But for Confucius, that was not the case. He thought studying, learning, that's important. Creativity, forget about it. Just be precise in your learning and cultivate knowledge. That's what counts. And in order to continue to improve yourself, one has to cultivate the 5 constant virtues: benevolence, Rai; ritual propriety, Li; righteousness, Yi; wisdom, Xi; and integrity, Xin. Benevolence, that you think the best of the other person. Let them prove you wrong, but think the best first. Put the best construct on something that somebody did. If somebody comes late to a meeting, don't jump to the conclusion right away that he's just blowing you off and he's not, he doesn't like you. But find a way to say that, yes, he was probably caught in traffic. And so you are benevolent in your interpretation of situations. We talked already about ritual propriety, that you actually pay attention to rituals in your life. He wanted us to practice righteousness, that we do the right thing even if nobody sees that. For example, if somebody at a grocery store loses a $10 bill onto the floor and nobody sees that, you could just pick it up and quietly put it in your pocket and nobody would know. But if you are a righteous person or a person with integrity, you would give it back to the person who lost it. We talked about wisdom. Develop wisdom. Know things from the past, and therefore as you accumulate knowledge, you will accumulate wisdom. And again, have integrity. Things that you do what you say you will do. Here are some examples of what he taught, some of the things that you will find in the Analects. Maybe one of the most famous saying that you will find in the Analects by Confucius is the golden rule: do not do unto others that you do not want them to do unto you. When Confucius died, his teaching continued, and many teachers after him collected things in the Analects first, and then the Great Learning, the Mean, and then comes the book of Mencius. Mencius is another important Confucian teacher a few hundred years after Confucius. Confucius also became the most important teacher in the Han Dynasty. And the Han Dynasty made Confucianism a quasi-religion. They built temples and schools of teaching. They built ceremonies or developed religious ceremonies. And Confucius almost was regarded as a semi-god. You can notice that this has not had a lot of religious connection really, other than that these were ways to get in touch with the Tao. But the tradition later made Confucianism also a religious practice and not just a philosophy. And this is what my introduction to Confucianism is for today. I wish you good luck with the lesson and our next topic.